So I feel like I should get some ground rules out in the open before I continue on my topic of today. And why not start now when the topic matter is so relevant to this? This is as close to serious about anything non-gaming related I'll probably ever get, so forgive my indulgence, but don't worry, this doesn't have anything to do with hot issues like politics or religion or whatever it is people actually care about these days. This is just me stating how I tend to feel about things. If I was cornered in a dark alley and stomach punched until I was forced to answer, I'd say there'd have to be two thought processes most primary inside my adult brain. The concept of balance and the concept of freedom. I've often said, since 5th grade, actually, all things in moderation. And I love this because even the saying itself matters, or rather makes sense, because with all things in moderation, including the saying itself, in other words, every now and again you do have to actually go further than the normal. Every now and again the extreme is actually desirable. Thus it completes itself. I believe that's a tautology. I'm not entirely certain. A good example of not balance would be any game made by X company is one I must buy. Yeah, no. Sorry, I'm not that much of a fanboy, and no offense to fanboys, but that's not balance. Next thing is the concept of freedom, which involves choice. Now, I point to the most obvious example of that I could come up with right off the top of my head, which is optional difficulty. I prefer my video games to have a difficulty I choose, rather than being forced or withheld upon me. Now, whether it be a setting I change in the menus, or it's an optional content off to the side that's much harder than the regular things, however you go about it, I just want the choice. I also have to get one other thing out of the way and admit that I do tend to lean towards elitism more than I'd probably like to admit. Mostly in games that I'm really good at, like World of Warcraft. It's kind of hard to avoid that when you started off being present for the very first Ragnaros kill on your server and continued a career of being basically on the top of the rating for my server, all the way until the heroic Icecrown Citadel. But at the same time, I really cannot stand the truly elitist pricks who insist that something is better simply because it appeals to their particular elitism. Such as indie games, for example. The fact that a game's total budget is less than what I just spent for breakfast does not automatically make it good. Or vice versa, I might add. And the fact that a game is Japanese, and therefore is better, it pisses me off in the exact same manner. A game should be based on its own merits, not the system it's on, not when it was developed, not who developed it. The game. That's what matters to me, because I'm a gamer. A real gamer. Thank you. Which is another of my elitist points, but whatever. I'm sorry, I'm reminded of the forum posts when Catherine was coming out. It's a game you may or may not have ever heard of. It's a puzzle game that came out recently on the PlayStation 3. And the people in the forum posts, I'm not even going to talk about the game, because all anyone was bitching about in the forums was the fact that they didn't have an option to have the original Japanese audio in. Holy hell, these people raised a fuss over the fact that they didn't allow the original Japanese audio. These are people who don't speak Japanese. I just want to stress that. These are not Japanese people. These are American people who are Japanophile fanboys, who are like, oh my god, it's not in the original Japanese. How the fuck? I can only do 2 accents, by the way, and that's one of them, so forgive me. God forbid they translate the game to English, the language I can actually listen to. And it's just the same way with anime, but I'm not even getting into that. Forgive all of this, because this is all just build up to the main point I wanted to make, something I've been wanting to talk about for forever, something that's been bothering me significantly for like the past 2 years now. As I mentioned, balance, right? Right here in the middle. Too much this way and too much this way, and both are generally bad things. So the fact that everything from the 70s, 80s, and 90s is being remade and remade and remade is reaching the point of ridiculous these days, but I also have to add on to that the fact that most of those remakes I mentioned, the ones that make me just roll my eyes, are movies. I mean, for God's sakes, they did a Smurfs movie. They're thinking about doing a Top Gun movie. Do I need to add anything here? Not that I didn't like the original Top Gun, it's just... Anyways. Video games, thankfully, seem to have dodged this hurdle, and I would like to credit Squaresoft. Squaresoft, not Square Enix, by the way, for that. Because well, most of the game remakes nowadays, I shouldn't use the term remake. Most of the game retreads, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a bit, have been things that are good. You know, you see Link to the Past being re-released on the Game Boy Advance. You see Breath of Fire 2, also the Game Boy Advance. You see any of the old FFs being re-released on the SNES. All good stuff, right? Most of these remakes have been done... Most of these games are good games because, well, like I said, they're good games. They're properly done remakes. Now, I feel I have to qualify, because there are bad remakes. I actually can't think of any modern ones. Retreads. I can't think of any modern ones right off the top of my head. But I'll point to the examples I like to use so often for this. Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy V, Final Fantasy VI, and Chrono Trigger were all ported to the PlayStation 1. They were terrible. The load times were atrocious. The graphics had rendering issues. It was literally... They had just tried to shove it into the PlayStation as poorly and as brusquely as possible, and what you got was garbage. Compare that, just to use an immediate example, of the Chrono Trigger remake on the DS, where they actually reprogrammed some of the battle coding so it would be smoother and quicker and more fluid while you're playing the game. And that right there is the difference. Little things matter like that, at least to someone like me. The fact that they bothered to redo the battles so they would be smoother in a game like Chrono Trigger, which is a very flowing game, you know, no real turn-based combat unless you choose to. That was good. You know, it was a little change, but it was awesome. But let me state why I credit Squaresoft with the fact that remakes tend to be good these days. Final Fantasy. The original. The FF remake they made on the PlayStation was incredible. It completely redefined the game. I mean, yes, obviously the graphics were touched up, and the music was retooled and the sound was retooled, but the way they reprogrammed that game with all the modern conveniences that the later FFs introduced to the system, I don't even know what else to add to that, you know? They made a game that was a pain in the ass and a hassle and a bother to play fun. Hell yes, you know? So that's what started the trend. And you see remakes these days like, well, like all the FFs up to 6, which have been remade on the various portable systems and occasionally on the PlayStation. You see all of the Zelda remakes that they did. You see all of the, well, like the ones I was mentioning earlier, Breath of Fire and, excuse me. And I can't remember any of this right now because there's a huge list and I didn't really feel like looking it up for this. But the second point I'm getting to here is, and why I call it a retread, is Mario Galaxy 2. That's the simplest way I can explain it. Mario Galaxy 2 was Mario Galaxy for all intents and purposes, as far as the mechanics, as far as the game engine, everything that went into that code-wise, they added to it. Not denying that. And they added to it in a good way, not denying that. That's actually kind of my point. Mario Galaxy 2 was, for all intents and purposes, an expansion to Mario Galaxy. But they added in good ways, they improved in good ways, and they added tons of more content, which was awesome. The level design in Mario Galaxy 2 is some of my favorite level designs in any Mario to date. It was inventive, it was interesting, it was fun. It was a good game. And I get really tired of people who insist that every new game has to be new. The fact that it has to be something that was just developed and something that is a new idea. I don't want to see a game about spider burgers. I don't want to see a game about... I don't know. I can't even think of anything because my brain doesn't quite work that way. You know, a game does not have to be hitting new territory. A game does not have to be trying anything new to be good. A game has to be good to be good. I'll give you another example. The recent trend of coming out with games on the portable systems that have come out before, and they touch up the graphics, and they make the interface better, and blah, 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 you know, all that fun stuff. You know, Ocarina of Time 3D. Star Fox 3D. Final Fantasy IV, which has been remade 3 times, all on portable systems. You know, all of these things were well-done games in their own right. But I don't know. I guess my point is that just because a game isn't new doesn't make it not good. And it really bothers me, the elitism that some people tend to show, where if the game doesn't touch on some new groundbreaking territory, either in gameplay or in thought process, that it automatically isn't worth their time and attention. And they'll just bash the hell out of it. Oh god, it's the same game. You know what? New Super Mario Bros. Wii. That was Mario 3 in 3D, right? But it was still fun. I'm not going to call it one of my favorites, but it was still fun. It was still enjoyable. Gary and I played the hell out of that game, and had quite a good time with it, I might add. We killed each other constantly, without meaning to, because, you know, player collision in that game tends to lean itself towards that. But you know what? It was still fun. It was still enjoyable. We had a ball. Donkey Kong Country Returns, also on the Wii. Fun as hell. We have been enjoying the crap out of the game. We've actually finished the game. We haven't done mirror mode. Not going to do mirror mode. But the point is, we did everything. We did all the regular level things, all the K levels, all of that. And with a few small exceptions, it was still fun, even though it was clearly Donkey Kong. And I guess that brings me to my ultimate point. The concept of expansions, like I said earlier. Now, I'm not talking about EverQuest. Although, ironically, that type of thing fits into what I'm talking about perfectly. If someone today came out, took Secret of Mana, and came up with new stuff to do, you know, call it Secret of Mana Point 2, and it had all sorts of new content and new areas to explore and new quests and new plot, still Secret of Mana, still the exact same game. Even have it be, you know, same SNES style graphics and controls and everything. I would probably buy that. And I would probably buy that new, depending on how well it was done. It would depend. But the point is, that's what an expansion is and should be. There's no reason you can't add more to do in a game that's already good. Another excellent example is all those little ROM hacks you see of Link to the Past or the original Zelda that are the same game, but at this point you're playing a new thing. You're playing a new expansion. You have more stuff to do that you've never had to do before, and it's fun. It's interesting, and hard as hell usually, because most ROM hacks are designed to be screw you, for lack of a better way to put it. You know, Kaizo. I'm going to call that. Most ROM hacks are designed to be Kaizo, which is another good example, by the way. Kaizo World and Kaizo 64. And I just wish every now and again I could go to a game developer and say, take FF6 and do more. Please, I would buy it. Take Chrono Trigger, do more. I would buy it. Take Mega Man 2. Except they did that. Mega Man 9 and 10. That was a beautiful idea. But you get the idea. I wish that game developers would look at people like me who want to enjoy the games they already enjoy and just have more to do, and actually appeal to that audience. And I have trouble coming up with an example of that off the top of my head, other than Mega Man 9 and 10. Maybe I'm alone in this, I don't know. But as always, this is just my opinion, and I don't really know what else to add to that, so I'm going to sign off now.